time is fast approaching where the Pentagon cannot, I think they're hanging on by their fingernails to keep this subject down, because too much is emerging. He went on the Joe Rogan Experience, and he says something that he's never said before. He admits to Joe Rogan that the US is in possession of at least 10 recovered craft.
Mm.
And then you've got Eric Davis on film saying, oh yeah, we're talking about the Nordics, the insectoids, yes, the small greys. If it doesn't happen within this next 12 months, we are really looking probably to catastrophic disclosure. There is going to be a major UFO conference involving very senior people from around the world in the Middle East, maybe in October.
Hello, everybody. I'd like to introduce a returning guest, Gary Heseltine, a former police detective turned independent UAP investigator, author and vice president of the International Coalition for Extraterrestrial Research, ICER. Gary, good to see you again. It's been a couple of years, I think.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure, Anders. It's good to see you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. This is going to be exciting because there is an incredible amount of new development in the UFO or UAP field. So we have a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah.
So let's start off by talking a little bit about your book, Non-Human. First of all, how's it been going? Is it selling well, or?
Well, it's never going to have the same impact as if I'd gone through a mainstream publisher, because it won't have the same distribution. But that was a deliberate choice on my part, because I wanted to get the truth out there and I wasn't interested in the money factor. The idea was to just get the fact out there in a way that's never been presented before. Lots of the information in the book, new and old, had never ever turned up in any documentary or any podcast as far as I could see. It took me 3 years to write the book, 5 years to research it, and I'm glad I did it. So yes, several thousand copies have gone, but that's not the same as if it had gone through a mainstream publisher like Imminent with Lou Elizondo and various things like that. Now, I am in the process of maybe writing a second
Okay.
with updates based on the last couple of years. There's I think a significant new witness that I've got, Rendlesham witness, come forward. Not, I might add, a security police officer, but military, who was there at the time, who's given me some very interesting information. So there's bits and pieces, and I could probably add another 100 pages to the book if I wanted to.
Wow.
And inevitably you get a little bits of feedback from people who were featured in the book. I got a great endorsement of the book by some of the military witnesses that I wrote about, really, for the first time. So I think they should, their comments should be recorded for posterity more than anything else. But
absolutely,
the book has done really well, and in terms of, you've got periods where it sells a lot, and then it'll dwindle down, but there's always a certain amount per month.
Yeah,
but what's really interesting is that there's been a couple of spikes, and actually there's a bit of a spike at the moment. One, there was a really big spike when I appeared on Reality Check with Ross Coulthard to discuss the book. Not unsurprisingly, really, he's really popular and he's got a huge audience for it. So there was a spike there, and now we're actually having a bit of a spike as a result of Capel Green, the documentary.
Yes, let's go there. Okay. Sorry to interrupt you, but for those in the audience who are not familiar with your book, Non-Human, I just have to say that it's about one of the biggest UFO events in history, the Rendlesham forest incident or incidents back in 1980. And now there, as you are mentioning here, there is a documentary about exactly this UFO event out there, Capel Green. So I haven't seen it, but I've seen trailers and read about it. it's based mainly on Larry Warren's testimony, if I understand it correctly, or?
Well, yes and no. And there is a story from my point of view, because the project began in, I think, September of 2017. So we're talking 8 years, which is a hell of a long time. Too long for a documentary, in my opinion. I was heavily involved as the lead researcher and writer for the first 3 years. But after 3 years, when we already then had over 60, 70 hours of material, there was more than enough material to finish the documentary then. And I'd only signed on originally for 18 months. So after 3 years, I said, I'm walking away, and I'm going to write a book, because I had so much material that I got. I thought, well, it's never going to end up in a documentary. There just won't be room for it. So that's really how the book started. I never intended to write a book, but in the end,
so you were involved in this documentary project from the beginning, and then you dropped out, and the other people continued.
Yeah, well, it really continued just with a small handful of people, and a lot of people doubted whether it would come out at all, but I always hoped that it would, hence why there was a chapter in my book about it. And so I've not seen the film yet, although I am about to see it on Saturday, believe it or not. It's had a very limited cinema run in the UK at a couple of cinemas, so I'm going to actually just turn up and just give it the once over on Saturday. So I'm looking forward to that. I know 3 people who've seen it who I am friends with, who are researchers, and they've given me pretty detailed feedback on it.
Okay, so have you the understanding that they come up with some new information?
Well, no, I think
comparison with what you are displaying in your meticulously researched book.
Well, obviously, I knew and was privy to a lot of the footage that had already been filmed in the 3 years I was involved, and I had interviewed most of the principal military witnesses, if not all, during that 3 years. So I kind of knew what it was based on. What has happened is that the one area in particular that I didn't talk about, which is, I understand, featured heavily in this final version, is about the scientific evidence. Is there any evidence to prove scientifically that an incident took place where people believed an incident had taken place? And the answer is yes, and I can now talk about it. So I won't go into details with the names at the moment, but that will again feature in the second edition, because there were certain things that I agreed not to talk about because they were deemed exclusives kind of thing. So I didn't talk about certain things, but suffice to say that there is scientific evidence that I was aware of 5 years ago that now is portrayed in the film, with a scientist who has been doing lots of background radiation checks in the whole of the forest, not just in the areas where people said something had happened. He's been doing them with his wife, thousands and thousands of checks over many years, 6-7 years, and they've really got some extraordinary readings that you'll see about in the documentary. But suffice to say that one of those sites, or in fact the most interesting site, was the site where Larry Warren said the craft came down. So in an area where he said that,
I'm sorry, can you say that again? Where Larry Warren said that? Larry Warren
had always said that there'd been another landing, or for him it was just the landing, but it turns out that this is a second landing, because he wasn't aware of the first one.
In the forest or in the field?
No, this is in what's called Capel Green, the field, hence the title of the documentary. The field is called Capel Green. It's a farmer's field. But suffice to say that where Larry Warren was very specific in saying it happened there, the craft was there, actually in that location there is scientific evidence and weird underground isotopic ratios that shouldn't be there, that are nowhere else in the forest. So,
and did they do these measures now recently, or
no? These were done 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, but I mean, still, I mean, a long time after the event.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And it's still, the radiation is still there, and have they found, microspherules or something that from strange?
I can't go into too much detail, but suffice to say that in the exact area where Larry Warren said, so within maybe 10, 20 meters of him saying it was there, bear in mind all the years later, deep down about 6-7 feet underground, there were certain elements recorded, isotopic ratios, that shouldn't have been there. And they form a triangular pattern. So that's kind of, I think, I'm looking forward to see how that's dealt with, because I obviously was aware of it 5 years ago. But yeah, so there's scientific evidence that it's going to be interesting. I'd done lots of interviews that were then, after I'd walked away, I'm still, I believe, in the film quite a lot because I did most of the interviews with the military witnesses, but I think he's recut some of them because I wasn't involved and I had no part in the production whatsoever. I gave away my percentage, as it were, just to get the book out. And so I'm interested to see. The thing that is slightly surprising for me is that it's a 4-hour documentary played in two parts. So it's like two 2-hour sections. I think it's 238 minutes, which is from a documentary point of view, seems to be a ridiculously long documentary. But I guess I'll have to see it. The people that have seen it have said it's very, very good. It was always designed to be shown on the cinema in terms of the sound and the picture quality, 4K, 8K, that kind of thing, and the drone footage. It should be well received by the UFO community.
Yeah.
That said, there's still a hell of a lot of politics around the case and around the Larry Warren factor, that he was vilified for many, many years. And when Ross Coulthard interviewed him recently, he found it hard going because Larry's very bitter at the way he was treated. And he probably doesn't help himself at times because he wants to be a bit, get the facts in about what's happened to him, which is probably not what Ross was trying to do. Ross was trying to basically cross-examine him and elicit what he would feel new information, but it'd be very hard to do that, and it didn't really work for me, and at times was a bit confusing. But suffice to say that what my book really established was that there was corroboration for Larry Warren's account, not by just one person, military person, Sergeant Adrian Bustinza, but there was corroboration that he was in the forest on one of the nights of activity by at least two other people. Steve Longero, who featured in the Ross Coulthard show, but wasn't really presented well on that, and he was some of the questioning confused him a bit by Ross being inaccurate with some of his assertions. So that confused him a bit. He's not a natural flamboyant TV kind of person, very reluctant, but nevertheless, was he there? Yes. And did he say that Larry Warren was in the forest? Yes, he did, because he saw him what was called the staging area. The staging area is this area that's now become quite well known, is where when vehicles went into the forest for the first time, as it were, they went down a dirt track. It's now established into a proper pathway, almost a road, almost. But then it was just a dirt track, and eventually it came to a stop because the path stopped, and so you couldn't go any further. So this little area became flattened, and over time has now become quite a large area. But then it was basically where all the vehicles had to stop. So it was a dead end, and basically you maybe had 7 or 8 different vehicles there. Plus you had these portable generators called light holes that had been taken there. So it's basically an area where all the vehicles were, and many of the airmen and officers that were out there congregated because it was basically a central point. You couldn't go any further into the forest. And bear in mind that at night, there was absolutely no lighting whatsoever unless you had these portable generators. Well, at least on one of the nights, probably 2 of the nights, the generators that were working fine on the base would switch on and then switch off, mysteriously affected by some kind of EM, electromagnetic force. They were working fine on the base, and then when you got them in the forest, they would momentarily switch on and then they would just die out. So very strange that they wouldn't work in the forest. So literally it was an area where people just had torches, maybe the vehicle headlights, and that was it. So this became kind of like a central hub where everybody was milling around waiting for orders. And it actually, I think, plays quite an important role over what is, I don't think it's originally it was deemed as one night. Then it was deemed, when the Holt memorandum came out in 1983, that it mentions 2 nights of activity. Well, I actually think now that we're talking, and it was in the conclusions of my book, that there were 17 different timed UFO related events. So that's 17
over the course of several weeks, I suppose.
No. This would be over about a week long period.
Yeah, okay.
Because one of the things that I revealed in my book was there was an airman called Steve Wagner, and whose story wasn't known really until the book. And basically, he tells a very interesting story about the 23rd of December, which is like 3 days before anybody talks about any incident. So, and that's kind of came out. He'd had a sighting during 1980 of him that was recorded, and he reported it, but he was given a hard time. Basically, he got into trouble for reporting it. So he'd always said to himself that if I see anything else, I ain't going to bother reporting it to the authorities, to the senior officers. So in light of that, and he's very specific that it's the 23rd of December, pre-Christmas, he said that he was called, he was on patrol, mobile patrol, with another officer, airman, and they were directed to go to the east gate of what is called RAF Woodbridge. And it's basically the back gate. It's not the main entrance. It's a back gate that opens out onto a little rural country road, basically. It's the back road. And he at the time, he said that he was on patrol and they were directed to go to the back gate because an airman who was on the back gate on patrol, stationed at the gate, said that he was frightened by something that had been seen to land in the forest or go down into the forest. So they get there and the airman is all shook up, and they said, "What did you see?" And he said, "Something came down over there." Well, when he points over there, he's pointing to an area maybe 150 meters from that back gate. And the original position of the gate has changed. So in 1980, from where it is now, it's about 75 meters further back. So from his location, he basically says it's 45 degrees there over to my right if you put your back to the gate, as it were. And at that time in 1980, there was a clump of trees, Corsican pines, that obscured his view. So something going down into the forest, he would see it dropping down to the level of the tops of the tree, and then he wouldn't see it. Well, he was shook up, and they said, "Right, we'll go take a look." Well, when they get there, they find a little clearing, but they don't see anything in terms of anything physical. There's no craft, there's nothing. They don't see anything UFO related. However, his throwaway line almost that I came back to him on was, "But we did find some ground impressions." I said, "Well, what do you mean by ground impressions?" He said, "Well, there were 3 depressions in the ground in a small clearing where he said it was, approximately 150 meters from the east gate. And he said they were in a perfect triangle position." Right. Now, bear in mind what we knew about Jim Penniston's small craft in a clearing that was, which we now believe was the 25th into 26th of December. Well, nobody had ever heard of other ground depressions. So the ones with Jim Penniston were about 9 inches in a perfect triangular formation, equilateral, to the same depth, same shape as it were. So pressed into the soil, maybe 1.5 inches, and about 9 inches in circumference. That was Jim Penniston's. Well, I said, "Okay, well, how big were these depressions?" And he said each one was about 5 feet across. 5 feet across, so 160 centimeters each. Now that then indicates that something much bigger had touched down, albeit briefly probably, in the forest, and seems to offer corroboration to what the airman was saying. So, so I take it from that as a first incident that something anomalous appears to have been in the forest on the 23rd of December. So I think it's that from the 23rd all the way to the end of December.
So 17 incidents. I mean, that this event lends itself to a much more dramatic kind of movie or film that Capel Green promises to be, of course. I mean, compared to the Roswell incident, which is, as far as we know, 1 or maybe 2
at the most
happenings. But this, at the most, yeah. But this is, I mean, this is an array of incidents and sightings, and so many people involved, so many witnesses. There are many names here, and then you mentioned some of them here, and I can just recommend for people to watch and listen to the first episodes that I did with you, and also read the book, of course, if you have the opportunity. Non-Human.
Now, all the principal witnesses that you'll see in any documentary about Rendlesham, they're basically just 3 witnesses that are used all the time, and that is Jim Pennison, John Burroughs, and Colonel Holt, the former deputy base commander. Well, you're looking at maybe 50 documentaries done over the years. They virtually cover all of those people, and they're there, and they get heavily involved in choosing who's going to be in the show and whatever. So I guess in a sense you're getting a controlled narrative, which is what I say in the book, is that the narrative is being controlled, and it's being controlled because certain people don't want you to talk about other things that have emerged, one of them being this second landing. And the reason why the second landing was vilified by these other 3 is because it involved entities.
Yeah,
it's being filmed on motion picture footage. So you can see that in 1980, when you try to keep a lid on this, the last thing that they want is any talk of a second landing where there's entities, aliens. It's being filmed on movie footage, and that the base commander, Colonel Gordon Williams, turns up and has a face-to-face with these entities in this field. Now, it sounds like science fiction, but when I finally, after 2 years of trying, got hold of Sergeant Adrian Bustinza, he confirmed that, and he said Larry Warren was in a cordon around the craft that was closer to hit the craft than he was.
Yeah, so, and he was the one who was filming as well, wasn't it?
No.
Somebody did. Somebody filmed though, and this film material is not to be found anywhere today.
Right. The scenario that Larry Warren had said that he'd first disclosed in the late 1983 was he was the one, and he becomes the original military whistleblower because he's the first person to say, my name is Larry Warren, and I was there, and I did this. He was the first person to nail his colours to the mast. Now, at the time, most people didn't realise the extent of all the activity. It was still emerging. It took 40-odd years to fully emerge to where we are now. So, like, when Larry Warren was involved, he thought his was the only incident. Why would he think there's anything else? And initially, when he was taken out into the forest, he believed that he was just being taken out for a military exercise. He didn't think that there was anything UFO related. But what he said was that he was originally on a small lone perimeter post called Perimeter Post 18. Everywhere on bases, you'll have little buildings that are like security points, where in the event of a nuclear threat or invasion or something like that, you'll have soldiers there with their guns looking out. Little positions, we would call them sangers, little security buildings, those kind of things. Well, he was on this little perimeter post by himself when he gets a radio message saying, close your position down and you're going to get picked up. And he went, okay. So on the radio, he gets under control and says, I'm closing down perimeter 18, awaiting pickup. Then a vehicle turns up. He's then picked up and don't know where he's going. He's then eventually taken into what turns out to be, he didn't know the name of the forest, turns out to be Rendlesham Forest, to the end of this area where you can't go anymore, what now turned out to be the staging area. And there's a lot, he says there's 15, 20 other military personnel waiting there, other vehicles. And then he said that he was then tasked by Colonel Holt. So he says that the deputy base commander was there. And he said he was put into a little small squad to go walk into the forest. Now, bear in mind, it's pitch black. The undergrowth was really thick. You know, all you had was a torch. And he and a small number of others were told to go walk through the forest. So being a young airman, fresh out of training, he just did what he was told. And so he walks through the forest, and eventually he sees, as he's walking through the forest, he sees that there's a glow in the distance through the forest. And this, he could see this because Corsican pines are not there now, although the forest has been replanted with a different type of pine. Corsican pines were there originally in 1980 until they were blown down in a freak storm in 1987, which destroyed 90% of the forest. So when they replanted, they did a slightly different version of the pine. Now, what's significant about that is that the Corsican pine, it's like a twig. It's like a straight pole with no branches for the first 15, 20 feet. So it's just like a stick. So if you can imagine, then you have the canopy above, starting 15, 20 feet off the ground. So it's like rows and rows of sticks stood up that you could see clearly between them. So if there was a light in the distance, you would see underneath the canopy very easily because there were no branches. The branches only started, and this is often lost because people don't understand the little geographical aspects and the layout of the land, as it were. But anything that was of a bright light, you would see quite clearly. And when Holt talks about it, that there was an object, red, winking with a dark centre, like an eye winking at you. He said it's manoeuvring through the trees. Well, it's manoeuvring through the trees because there's no branches and it's underneath the canopy. So that's entirely feasible. So in Larry Warren's scenario, he says that he is going through the forest with a small number of other military personnel, and he sees a glow. And he thinks, what's the glow? You know, he's thinking, well, there's no electricity out here. What's causing the glow? So anyway, he eventually emerges from the trees, the edges of this forest, to what was a farmer's field. Then it was just basically a grass field with cow pats, several cows in the area. But what he sees when he gets to the edges, he says, I see this really weird scene. He said, when I got there, there was a strange mist, a ground-hugging mist, almost in a circular pattern that was about 50 feet in diameter. And he said it was in the middle of the field, and he said there were security police officers in a cordon around it. And he was told, join that cordon. So he does as he's told. He joins the cordon. So he joins 10, 15 others near this mist. And he said this mist was maybe 1 to 2 feet off the ground. And he said it was like a green, yellowish mist that seemed to keep a shape. He said it was weird. But then he said, as he's joined that cordon, he said he hears somebody over the radio. And bear in mind that there were various different radio channels. Not everybody had the same radio set on the same channel. He hears over the radio, it's coming. So everybody's kind of looking. And then he sees a small red light come from the direction of the sea, which was maybe only less than 2 miles away from where he was in this field. So he's coming from the north, and he says this object then comes down in a downward arc and then stops about 20 feet above this patch of yellow mist. Sounds like science fiction. And then suddenly there was an explosion of light, and everybody's rubbing their eyes. And when their eyes adjust and focus where the mist was, there was now a translucent, shimmering craft, approximately 20, 30 feet across. Okay? Delta shape. And everybody's like, whoa, what's going on here? And then he said that some senior officers turn up on foot So they've arrived by vehicle, probably to the staging area. Then that would approximately be 300 meters away from where he was in this exposed open field. And they come out in a group led by, he says, Colonel Gordon Williams, the base commander, the guy in charge of 12,000 personnel. All right. Now, as he comes walking towards, he also notices that to his right, basically on the other side of the craft, is two people filming. One using an early big shoulder video camera, which did exist, early video in 1980, and that was all checked out for the documentary. And also on a tripod, a cinefilm, which was the movie cameras of the day before digital. And so that's been filmed. And he also said that at the edge of the forest, bear in mind he'd gone from the forest into the field, maybe 40 meters into the field where this object and mist was, that then became an object. He saw that there were two British police officers in uniform constables, who were at the edge of the field, not in the field, they're just at the edge of the field, edge of the forest, looking at this incident taking place. And they had still cameras, which was feasible because in rural areas, police officers, I mean, we're talking about a different age where there was very little technology. One of the things that would often get called to would be road traffic accidents. So sometimes they'd have a camera, like a Polaroid or something like that, to take photographs of the scene should they need to. So it's entirely feasible that they may have had still cameras. Plus, they may have had their own camera for whatever reason, a small pocket camera.
So there were multiple modes of documentation going on, actually.
Well, in theory, yes, because it all gets taken away, which we'll come on to. But suffice to say that so that's what he saw. He saw that there were two cameras, movie cameras, two police officers cordoned around this now shimmering craft that he said was translucent, that you could not look at it straight on because it would morph and shape. So you had to kind of look peripherally at it because it kept distorting. Then he sees Gordon Williams, but something else significant happens. He said that as he's beside the craft, he sees what he describes as like a bubble slipping off the fabric of the craft. And it's actually shown in the trailer, which I was surprised because that's quite a good...
Yeah, I saw that. I saw that. So,
yeah, it looks like it slips off the craft.
Artificial, but yeah, I know.
Yeah, it slips off.
I know the story.
Yeah, it slips off the craft. And then the bubble, the single bubble, divides into three bubbles, which hover in the air, 2-3 feet off the ground. And within each of the bubbles, there is the upper torso of what he describes as like a childlike, ghost-like figure, wearing some kind of humanoid, big head, big eyes, but has some kind of clothing on at the top. Okay, and they're hovering beside the craft. You then have this scenario where the base commander turns up, and then they get within maybe 6 to 10 feet of each other. So there's three floating entities there, base commander there, silent face off. Larry Warren says, I never hear any words. He says, but maybe there's some telepathic exchange going on. But here's something that's often lost, that Larry Warren adds a level of detail that, to my mind as a former advanced interviewer, was always quite telling. He said at one point there was a sound of somebody breaking a branch in the forest nearby, which is maybe 40 meters away at the edge of the forest. And he said, like if you stand on something and then it breaks, makes quite a loud snap. He said there was a snap in the forest, and he said these three creatures retreated away back to the craft to seek refuge. So maybe they were a few feet away, and then they instinctively went back. Now, it's a little detail that if you're making this story up, you just wouldn't add. It's a level of detail that you just don't see. And there's no need to add it to the story. If you're telling a fictional story, you don't make up extra stuff that's hard to remember. But he said they recoiled, which is what you would do.
Adds credibility to the story.
Yeah. So there's this silent face-off, and then all that happens then from Larry Warren's point of view is somebody taps him on the shoulder, presumably a sergeant or above, and says, right, you can leave now, go back into the forest, back to the staging area. So that's what he did. He was 19 years old. He didn't have any rank. He was the lowest of the low. So he left. So his lasting memory is that this is still going on, this silent face-off, this cordon, still being filmed, is still all going on as he's leaving the scene, going back to the staging area. Now, what Sergeant Adrian Bustinza corroborates is that he was a part of the cordon as well. He saw Larry Warren closer to the craft than he was. He said there was at least one camera filming it, motion picture filming it. He also recalls the policeman by the edge of the forest. And he also recalls senior officers being there, including Gordon Williams, which is almost a blow by blow to a certain extent. But it sounds like he's got there a little bit later. Bear in mind that people were arriving into the forest from different directions. And on that night, Sergeant Adrian Bustinza was called what was called the NCOIC, non-commissioned officer in charge, which basically meant he was a mobile patrol, but he was effectively, in military terms, a gopher. Go for this, go for that, get me this, get me that. So he had a roving mission that night, and Colonel Holt had said to him on several occasions earlier in the night, will you get me some light-oils from Woodbridge? Can you get me some light-oils from Bentwaters? So he'd been to and from the forest several times before this later incident takes place with Larry Warren. So that accounts again why there's multiple incidents on multiple nights. So that's why you can have several incidents that actually accrue over 1 or 2 nights, because actually there's been 3 or 4 incidents on one night, 3 or 4 incidents on another night, and that's how they build up. But they're different timed events involving different people. That's why they were broken down in that way. There were 17 different timed events. So on this particular incident, Bustinza would say that he saw Colonel Williams, the base commander there, which is really important, because when Holt retired, bear in mind, he'd rarely said anything up to that point because he.
Let me just ask. I mean, Commander Holt, who you mentioned several times, he's no longer with us, is he?
Yeah, no, he's still with us.
He is okay. So is he?
No, he's still alive, but he has a very interesting part to play because.
I mean, he wrote the first memorandum that made this story enter the mainstream media in the first place.
Yes, but the story behind that was that it was never supposed to come out. And he did everything he could when he learned that.
To retract it afterwards.
To retract it, yeah.
Yes.
He knew his life would. He was told it will never come out.
But he did it, which is really important in this.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because, but there is a kicker with that, because one of the things that's what you've got to realize about my book is that I highlight the fact that I think there's several agendas going on. It's quite political. The Americans didn't want this to come out because it would infer that UFOs are real, and we're not really interested in UFOs. We closed Project Blue Book in 1969, so we're not doing any kind of interest in UFOs, and here we have got this great case in 1980. There's footage. We don't want to talk about footage. We don't. Aliens, don't be daft. We don't want to talk about aliens. So they did everything. But that really only kicked off about aliens being ridiculed was when Holt retired in 1991, which is 11 years after the incident. And as soon as he retired, he then started to attack Larry Warren, saying, nah, he wasn't there, he's a wannabe, he's just making it based on other people's stories and blah, blah, blah. And really, it was a very odd thing for a senior officer to do, to go on to the offensive, instead of saying, look, we were caught up in something weird. Well, let's all stick together. I'm the senior officer. Let's all stick together. I respect what you've seen. I can't understand it, but we're all in this together. He didn't take that approach. His approach was, as soon as he retired, attack Larry Warren's account of there being a second landing and an entity's been seen. So,
well, I mean, if he was telepathically communicating with these entities,
No, he's not the one that was doing that. That was
okay. I thought it was.
No. Colonel Holt wrote the memorandum.
Yeah, but right. Okay. So was it Williams?
He was there.
Was it William, the highest
ranking
commander?
The one that was the base commander in charge of 12,000 people. He was the one in the field.
I see. Okay, so yeah, I
just, but Holt was there. I believe Holt was there.
Conflated the two commanders. Yeah.
Yeah, and it does get confusing if you're not aware of the story. I always say that the Rendlesham account, because it's so involved, is the most complicated case in history, UFO terms. But also because there's multiple agendas. I think that some of the witnesses have got agendas, personal and maybe collective. Governments, the media have been involved in playing it down. So those kind of things, there's lots of agendas. Now, what you have to understand is with Larry Warren's account, he said this as late as late 1983. And for about 8 years, he was on his own doing all the media. And he featured in early documentaries on camera, full face. Everybody else was blacked out, but he wasn't. So that's why he gets that distinguished title of being the first military whistleblower to go on the record, because he put his name to it. Well, for about 8 years, nobody disagreed with him. They just were like in amazement, whatever. And he only becomes vilified, which then persisted from 1990 to 91 until basically today, with the release of the documentary. He's been vilified over the years by people who then said he wasn't there when they retired. So you had Holt retires in 91 and says, it's a load of rubbish, he wasn't there, he was a druggie, blah, 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 got kicked out. All of which is not true. But again, bizarre why you'd suddenly attack somebody as soon as you retire. It's like he was told to create a storm against Warren. That's my assertion. 1993, you get Jim Penniston retiring. As soon as he comes out, says, I didn't know anything about Larry Warren. I don't even remember him there. These were early on. I think he's just a wannabe, blah, blah, blah. Very much following Holt's pattern. And then 1995, John Burroughs, who was with Jim Penniston on what was regarded as his first landing, he retires and says, I don't recall anything, Warren being there, blah, blah, blah. I'm not aware of this incident. I think it's all made up. So the three principal witnesses that you see in every documentary made are attacking him. So the significance of finally getting to interview Sergeant Adrian Bustinza, and for him to more or less corroborate entirely what Warren had said for this incident in the field, it was amazing.
Yeah, it's clear that there are some people who want to
cover it all up,
to cover it up, of course, for various reasons. Now, so that's perhaps a good segue over to talking about what's happening today, and not least in the United States. Because last time we spoke, you had high hopes for the new legislation that was coming in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whistleblower protection, compulsory briefings in Congress about secret UAP programs. And are you happy with the development so far? What have you've seen since we spoke?
Yes and no. When we had the first witness congressional hearing in 2023.
July 23, was it?
Yeah, 23. With David Grush, Commander David Favor and Ryan Graves, two military pilots. That had a real impact at the time with the mainstream media, who are always our biggest enemy because they don't take this subject seriously because of what they've been told. Or
I know. Tell me about it.
Yeah.
It's really
the impact of that hearing for a couple of weeks was really quite profound. There was a lot in the mainstream, even in the UK and around the world, because of the caliber of the people. The unfortunate thing there was the timing. It was just before the Congress and the Senate broke up for the summer. So when this comes out, it's really hot news, and it's getting a lot of mainstream media coverage, and you think, wow, we're making a breakthrough. We're on the edge of a breakthrough. And then, of course, you go into the summer recess for about 6-7 weeks, and that gives them the time for the people that want to cover this up to start putting out disinformation. During that time, there was a story to try to make David Grush the principal witness, the intelligence guy who gave testimony, to ridicule him by the releasing his medical records and trying to say he was insane at one point,
depressed, and
yeah, and the press jumped all over it, and they tried.
Well, he was depressed, or
no, he really
his best friend got killed or something like that.
So killed himself.
They utilized that.
Yeah, but again, that was set up to try to damage this great witness's credibility. And unfortunately, the mainstream media went with it for a lot, and there was a lot of coverage and whatever. And that momentum that was there in the couple of weeks after there was real momentum, but then that died off during the summer. So then the Schumer amendment legislation, which had already been proposed by that time of that hearing, it was about the same time, it went through, and it passed in one of the houses in the Senate. I think it was passed in the Senate, and then in Congress it was then, or I think it passed in the Congress, and then it was stopped or gutted, as it were. 64 pages of proposed legislation, the UAP Disclosure Act of what would have been 2023, was gutted by one of the houses. I think it was the Senate. By the Armed Services Intelligence Committee, but they effectively took 80% of the good bits out of it and just left a few bits. What still got through, which was significant, was that, and it became part of legislation, is that the term non-human intelligence became law, which was significant. It was mentioned.
Yeah, that's really significant.
Yeah, really significant. And then, of course, the next year, 2024, you've by then got what's called the UAP caucus, which is some congressmen and women who are allegedly interested in trying to get disclosure and more transparency on the subject. They come together, and there's maybe originally 2 or 3, and it's now probably 5 or 6. But then they start to become more prominent. They're pushing for more congressional hearings and to get the Schumer legislation resubmitted for 2024. So again, it gets resubmitted again 2024, and exactly the same thing happens. It gets gutted, it doesn't go through the 64 pages of the UAP Disclosure Act, is stopped at the last hurdle, as it were. There's another congressional hearing last year that had Luis Elizondo, retired Admiral Tim Galladay. He was brilliant. Luis Elizondo was very good. Mike Gold, and then they had Schellenberger, who was on there, but it didn't have the same impact. At all. And realistically, the only 2 that should have been there were Tim Galladay, the Admiral, and Luis Elizondo. There should have been other witnesses, but apparently others dropped out at the final moment. We don't. But suffice to say, that didn't really have the same impact.
Maybe they got the skiff flu, as they talk about.
Well, I've heard various different things about that, which is, I think, moving into a slightly political narrative of that we can't be sure of. So let's avoid that for now. Suffice to say, yes, I'm aware of that, but I don't really know the genuine reasons why people didn't get into the skiff quicker. We know that David Grush wanted to go into a skiff straight away, and he said that when he was being cross-examined. Well, I can tell you that in a secure facility. He didn't get into a skiff for another, I think, 18 months, which is ridiculous kind of thing.
Yeah.
But suffice to say that over time, since 2023, certain people in the intelligence community who do not want this story to come out are doing their best to try to slow it down. Now, personally, I think that too much has come out, and too much is already coming out with other whistleblowers coming forward. We're talking about much more information in the last 12 months from first-hand whistleblowers, people who say that they've been actually involved in crash retrievals, UFO crash retrievals, and involved in reverse engineering projects. So,
yes, we have Jake Barber, for instance. We have Matthew Brown.
Jake Barber.
Yeah, Jake Barber. These people are hopefully also coming to Congress at some point. There is a new Congress hearing on September 9th,
I believe so. Yeah, so things are bubbling up, but there has been, from a researcher's point of view, a very frustrating period of the last 18 months where we've gone forward slightly, but not enough. And there is certainly I mean, if you think of AARO, the All Domain Resolution Office, they do an historical report that's released in early 2024 about the last 50, 60 years of the phenomenon, and it's an absolute whitewash. It was supposed to be based on science and transparency, and it was nothing like. And it was widely condemned by everybody, including people like Chris Mellon, the former Under Secretary of State for Defence. So it was very inaccurate. And people that given testimony, like Robert Salas, about the Maelstrom UFO incident, the shutdown of nuclear missiles in 1967, he given testimony, but there's no reference to it, and it's ridiculed, as it were. And it was almost like going back to the 1970s, the Condon Committee are just trying to whitewash this. So for a lot of people, the AARO, the All Domain Resolution Office, was totally exposed as just a Pentagon tool to downplay this subject. Yeah. They weren't really the good guys.
I'm sure you're aware of the Wall Street Journal article that was out.
Oh, yeah. And again,
which was based mainly on the first AARO head there, I think, Sean Kirkpatrick. And they actually said, I mean, for real, said that, or he claimed that, I mean, most of the UFO mythology in general was a hoax orchestrated by the Pentagon. I mean, how ridiculous is that?
Absolutely. But of course, if you've only got a passing interest, or you just pick up what is regarded as a good publication, a genuine, serious journalist piece, then you're just going to read that. And the impact on ordinary people who just read that because it's the Wall Street Journal, they're just going to think there's no to it, reinforcing this stigma that's
But I don't think it was actually I mean, other papers that didn't really pick it up.
No. It was basically the Wall Street Journal,
and New York Post as well, I think.
Yeah, those two. But in recent times, they have come out very definitely against UFO transparency, and for example, when things were being released by Sean Kirkpatrick, he would get in friendly journalists like the New York Post, like the Wall Street Journal, to give selected articles. So the rest of the media was being controlled. You weren't having, general consensus of top newspaper reporters there. It was a very small control group, a group that would obviously agree to put disinformation out. In effect, they might not have seen that themselves, but in effect, that's what happened. You had they were trying to control the narrative. And Sean Kirkpatrick, he lost total credibility. I don't think he ever had much really in the UFO field, but he was, I think it will go down very badly for him long term in his career, CV, that he played such a negative role, because the backdrop to all of this is there's still people like Matthew Brown, Jake Barber, coming out, first-hand witnesses who are saying, no, actually the Immaculate Constellation is the program that was doing the reverse engineering. I was involved in it, blah, blah, blah. We retrieved Jake Barber, say he gives you a piece of footage of an egg being dangled, an egg-shaped craft. Being, he was a helicopter pilot, and he says, I recovered it and laid it down there. And so there are all these kind of things now. People wanted first-hand witnesses, and this is starting to emerge. So I still think that time is fast approaching where the Pentagon cannot, I think they're hanging on by their fingernails to keep this subject down. But they really are on their last hold, as it were, because too much is emerging. There is a wealth. I mean, just recently, there was the UAP Disclosure Fund, a private organization. It basically hired Congress to have a briefing, a room set aside, and there they had Eric Davis, who was one of these famed UAP scientists along with Hal Puthoff. Well, you get two very strange things happen, which had never happened before. First of all, Hal Puthoff, who is arguably the most famous scientist to ever work on the UAP research that we know of, and he's been working on it for a good 30, 40 years. He went on the Joe Rogan Experience, which is like all glamour and blah, 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 the world's top biggest podcast, as it were. And he says something that he's never said before. He admits to Joe Rogan that the US is in possession of at least 10 recovered craft. What? I mean, this is a guy you'll see interviewed on documentaries, and he'll always say, well, I can't answer that question because of my non-disclosure agreement. He's always been very coy. And then suddenly on the Joe Rogan Experience, he's saying 10 craft. And then literally a few weeks later, 3 or 4 weeks later, one of his closest working colleagues, Eric Davis, he goes on this in this congressional meeting room organized by the UAP Disclosure Fund, and he's got Congressman Eric Burleson, part of this UFO caucus of politicians that are interested in transparency, and he sat beside him, and then you've got Eric Davis to a public audience on film saying, oh yeah, we're talking about the Nordics, the insectoids, yes, the small greys, and reptilian, and it's like,
yeah,
he's never said anything like that. So
fascinating.
what has loosened his lips? So so even though we've had a lot of frustrations over the last 18 months, 2 years, there's still things emerging that push the pendulum forward towards a disclosure moment. Now, you then get, regardless of politics, you then get President Trump elected to a second term. Now, before getting elected for a second administration, he'd already made some comments that he talked to pilots, and they said things are real flying around out there. But he'd still be very skeptical. But in his new team of senior people, he appoints people like Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio made many UFO comments saying,
yeah, he appeared in the Age of Disclosure documentary. Have you seen that?
Well, I'm going to come on to that, because I think the Age of Disclosure holds a very important part in what I think could be disclosure moment, in a disclosure moment. You then have Tulsi Gabbard. She will say that I want UFO transparency. You've got John Ratcliffe. You've got people like Kash Patel, head of the FBI, who's gone on record saying, yeah, I want full transparency. So he appointed all these people to very prominent positions in his administration. And you think, Christ, but if you're never going to get it, it's going to be, if you're going to get it, it's going to be now, because all the people are in the right places. But then I think that having got into office, he's then swamped by
the deep state.
Well, I think that and legitimate
security concerns.
Well, no, I think the legitimate things that he got himself involved in was trying to say, I'm going to solve the Russia-Ukraine war within the first 24 hours, which was never going to happen. But that's what he said.
Yeah,
so that became something he said he prominent when he got into office. And of course, we've seen that this saga developing, and probably nothing's going to develop. And similarly, we couldn't legislate for what was happening in the Middle East with Gaza and Israel, or Palestine and Israel. Again, getting away from politics. I think that swamped him, because he said, again, this wouldn't happen if I was in power, blah, blah, blah. So I think he's got caught up in those two major world events that have indirectly put the UFO subject on the back burner.
Yeah. Do you think that's the reason why the White House dismissed these stories about the so-called drone incursions in New Jersey and other places? Yeah,
but let's be clear. Nobody really knows what the drones were.
No, but I mean,
and that's
you just admit that we don't know what this is and stick with that.
Yeah, well, I think that's the story for now. But something that, I mean, I wrote an essay a couple of months ago, and I put out on the UFO Truth magazine blog page, and it's had had a lot of traction. But I basically say, well, you know, if it doesn't happen within this next 12 months, we are really looking probably to catastrophic disclosure. And for your audience that aren't aware what catastrophic disclosure is, I'll tell you. Basically, a retired colonel called Carl Nell in late 2023 first mentioned this term catastrophic disclosure. And what catastrophic disclosure is, according to him, is something where an incident happens today. It's seen by and filmed all over the world, and you can't control the narrative. You can't control the media with all the science that we've got now. I always liken it, and I've been saying it for several years, is that if we had an incident like the Phoenix Lights incident from 1997, and bear in mind that was tracked, seen by 50,000 people, filmed on grainy video, so it's tracked for a couple of 100 miles. It then stops over Phoenix. At night, lights come on that appear to show the structure of a mile-wide object, but it was grainy video. They managed to get away with it because the technology, the film quality wasn't quite good enough. They tried to say it was flares set against mountains, blah, blah, blah. They managed to just get away with it. If you had that incident happen now, huge mile-wide object, boomerang shaped, seen against the sky, blacking out the sky, seen by thousands and thousands of people over many, many miles before it stopped over Phoenix. What would happen? If we happen now, we go straight to 4K phone cameras, 8K phone cameras, live streaming. So imagine that you've now got this facility. So something's going over your town. It's low over the town, 200 or 300 feet off the ground, blocking out the sky. Somebody's going to be filming it now and going, wow, look at this. And then it'll go live streaming. And then somebody else will join that instant. They'll go, this really is taking place. And they'll tell their mate. And then everybody starts, you know, we have the ability to go viral within minutes now, which didn't exist before. Now we truly can go viral. If for example, Trump, when the assassination attempt, which nicked his ear, that went viral within minutes. Headlines flashing up all the TV, and of course, people were filming it, and that you can't control the footage, as it were. Once an incident starts going live, now we have the ability through live streaming and really good quality cameras to capture it in a way that we've never done before. So the catastrophic disclosure is an incident happens involving craft or whatever that is incontrovertible. You cannot control the amount of material that's been recorded. You can't control the narrative in the way that you have always been able to do from the 40s. And that's what catastrophic. Now, so effectively what you could have is, today we're talking on Wednesday, the 27th of August, and we're having this chat, and yet this afternoon there might be a huge incident in broad daylight above New York City, a big craft, kind of like an Independence Day scenario. Wow, that's going to go viral. They cannot contain it. And then suddenly you're into a disclosure world, but the people are unprepared for it. And what Carl Nell was saying was, we need to start preparing the groundwork for this, because that's the worst case scenario. That will cause a level of ontological shock. It will cause psychological trauma for some people. And he was saying that in late 2023. Well, I've been saying that the same thing, not under those terms, catastrophic disclosure, but the same thing for the last 3 or 4 years about, you know, what would happen if we had the Phoenix Lights out. So technology is moving at a pace. So we cannot control, or the authorities cannot control the media quite in the same way that they did.
If there are non-human intelligences out there, I mean, having these craft and whatever, don't you think they're aware of this fact that we have so much more communication technology now, and that I mean, so they can adjust to that, and also, I mean, maybe they are in cahoots with the deep state in the United States and other superpowers. So they are maybe. I mean, who knows?
Well, I think
they're orchestrating the whole thing.
Well, possibly so. And one of the reasons that has maybe some credence is one of the other things that Hal Puthoff said on the Joe Rogan Experience. And I put a transcript or a partial transcript of the show in the latest issue of the magazine. I was fascinated by it. He said, when we've got 10 craft, he says not all of them were broken or crashed, inferring that some had been left intact.
Deliberately,
Yeah, to be found. So then that goes into that deep state scenario of, are they trying to help us move forward technologically, or saying, well, you really need to be in on this now? And whilst it sounds like science fiction, there is an element that if Hal Puthoff, who's this fabled guy, he doesn't say things for no reason. Why is he talking now? And people talk about, is there a momentum building? Is there something coming in 2027 and all? And I'm not sure about any of that. Suffice to say that I've said for the last 3-4 years that the authorities know something we don't. That appears to be speeding up the agenda towards a disclosure moment at some point. You said September the 9th there's going to be another congressional witness hearing. We don't know who's going to be on, but I think it will be at least 3 or 4 witnesses again. Hopefully it's first-hand retrieval witnesses, immaculate constellation witnesses. Hopefully that's what we want. People want to hear facts. But we also need to, at some point, Tulsi Gabbard says, and only recently she said, about the drones. Well, I'm not happy about the drones. I've got lots of questions about the drones. So that's going to raise at some point. There is no question about it. A proportion of the drones seen over the US and all the incursions over the UK, some of these were anomalous. They didn't know where they came from. Yeah. They weren't tracked. They were on site for 3 or 4 hours. They were total impunity. You couldn't shoot them down. They tried pulse weapons to try to bring them down, didn't do so. And then when they left, nobody knew where they went to. So none of the anti-drone technology worked. Now, you think about where we're at. We see every day, literally, in the Ukraine-Russia war, drone warfare. And this is cutting-edge drone warfare. And it is still small drones flying around that can drop a payload and whatever. Terrible, frightening, scenario. Warfare is changing. However, if some of these craft with the capability of changing shape could not be tracked, etc., were in the possession or developed by Russia, well, why aren't they using them in the Ukraine war for their advantage, and vice versa? If Ukraine, who are believed to be the world's, I think, leading exponent of drones at the moment, cutting edge, why aren't that being used? If they have these incredible drones that can't be tracked, why ain't that being used as a weapon of war? And they're not. It's still conventional in many ways. Yes, it's cutting edge, but it's conventional by design, as it were. Yeah. So the elephant in the room is drones, and everybody just talks about, drones, but it's not. It's the elephant in the room. The drone issue is very much a part of the UAP topic, and many sightings that are down as drones are not. They're anomalous in nature, and that's a huge story ready to break open. And I think it's only a matter of time before something breaks. Tulsi Gabbard wants to get this story out. She wants to find out about drones. She wants to get greater disclosure and transparency out there. She wants to declassify videos, the good quality videos that Lou Elizondo has talked about, the 17-minute broad daylight filmed on an iPhone from a pilot with a UFO right next to his cockpit for 17 minutes in broad daylight, sunshine. Incontrovertible. Those kind of things should be out there. Yeah. And I think it's only a matter of time before we reach a point of a tipping point where I've always likened it to a dam breaking, that you've got some bricks in the middle of the dam that come loose. Eventually the pressure grows and grows on that, and it weakens the whole structure, and then eventually, boom, the whole thing collapses. Yeah. So I've always believed that when you have a disclosure moment, it will be like the breaking of a dam. And one day you'll be nothing, and the next day, boom, you're into it.
What are your hopes for the special task force for the declassification of federal secrets, where to which, I mean, the UAP disclosure thing is a major.
It sounds a great idea.
And it's Chairwoman Anna Paulina Luna. What are your hopes for that group and that?
Again,
and that
Anna
person?
Paulina Luna has really come to prominence, and she's the head of that task force.
And she was also on Rogan recently, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. I think she's a good person. She wants to get a level of transparency out there, and again, she's heavily involved in organising these witness hearings. Some people, like Jeremy Corbell, will suggest that the last 2024 hearing, there was a bit of shenanigans going on in the background, that some of the people who claim to be, or politicians who claim to be pro-disclosure maybe are fighting two sides. They're double. They can frame it in a certain way. They're not after the true disclosure that we want. We'll have to wait and see. But I think Anna Paulina Luna, her remit was only for 6 months for this task force. We're already, almost at that 6 month point. So I think it will get recommissioned, as it were, because I think other things have got in the way, like Gaza, like Ukraine, blah, blah, blah.
Now, was it only 6 months?
Yeah, initially it was only granted, I think.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, but but I think Anna Paulina Luna seems to be genuine, and I have high hopes that she will keep progressing it. You've got people like Eric Burleson who's really coming to the fore, Tim Burchett. They setting policy, setting politics aside, they seem to be genuinely committed towards a UAP disclosure world, whatever that is. And I think Eric Burleson seems to be really coming to the prominence now, because he's, like I say, he's the one who just he's pushing for these witness hearings. He's just had this hugely significant moment with scientist Eric Davis. So I think there's lots going on behind the scene, and let's maybe conclude it by going on to the Age of Disclosure. I think the Age of Disclosure documentary was meant to be part of a disclosure moment. It was there with senior politicians like Marco Rubio involved to be a part of an announcement, probably by President Trump, that we're dealing with some non-human intelligence. I think that's what it was made for and designed to do. I think that the world events have got in the way. If you remember, the documentary was only aired at a small Midwest film festival.
Yeah,
it never went on general release. I think it was a film festival. It got glowing reviews and said it was impactful, and then basically nothing. Well, I think it's been pulled from being streamed, and I think it will get a cinema run because it will be part of the disclosure movement. I think I think it will be timed. So when you see that film resurrected and saying it's going to be released on that day across all streaming media, blah blah blah.
Do you think it's going to be a part of a large?
Yeah. I think that will signal, because you think about it, it's got 34 prominent people, including Eric Davis, including Hal Puthoff, Jay Stratton, who ran the UAP task force. He says something in the trailer that he'd never said before. He says, "I have personally seen non-human beings and non-human craft."
Yeah, just the trailer is fascinating enough. But
think about it from this point of view with Senator Marco Rubio. Senator Marco Rubio is about the third most important person in the administration after the president. So hugely powerful role. And he's in this documentary saying that UAP, basically, we've got to have this disclosure. He's going to turn up in a UFO documentary in simple terms. Well, somebody of his prominence to be holding that role at the time that documentary comes out, surely the mainstream media finally are going to go, why is Marco Rubio in a UFO documentary?
Yeah,
that's surely going to attract a lot of media attention.
Well, I wouldn't be. I'm not convinced. Actually, I'm not actually entirely sure that that's going to happen, because I know how the mainstream media works.
It should do. Yeah,
they should do. Absolutely, absolutely. I agree.
That's the point. It should do.
Yeah.
And yes, I think the media is being controlled a lot these days. The narrative in the US is being controlled a lot, but nevertheless, surely the mainstream media will have to interview Marco Rubio about this, which then brings up the whole topic. So once that topic is raised, that's probably the moment, one, for the documentary, and two, for an announcement of some kind.
And the floodgates open.
Yeah, and the dam could break very quickly. I literally think that within a 48-hour period, once you go to a disclosure moment, that you then the dam breaks and then it's non-stop. And you'll know when you've got proper disclosure because it'll be 24/7, day in, day out, week in, week out, just like COVID. COVID.
Yeah.
And that's
a very interesting and compelling perspective that you're.
Yeah. Well, I think that's when you know you're into it, because then you know the whole world is talking about the same thing. And that's what will happen when we do have a disclosure moment, because one day life is normal. You look out at the blue sky and clouds and everything looks rosy in the garden. And then the next day, your life will never be the same, whether it impacts you privately, professionally, but you'll always have this question of, wow, we're not alone. How did we get here? What do they know about us? How long have they been around? And the world is into a different ballgame. So it will affect everything indirectly and directly once we're into a disclosure world. Life will never be the same, good or bad.
Well, some people are definitely in for an ontological shock, as it were.
Yeah.
So fascinating. Thank you so much for all these new perspectives, fascinating perspectives. So Gary, what's next for you, and where can people find your work?
I'll give you a link that you can put to the podcast for the book.
The description box.
Yeah, I'll give you the information. But yeah, I'm actually got a few things on the go at the moment. Many years ago, and as part of the steps that led me to become a public researcher, was I wrote a novel. I had a dream. It sounds not Martin Luther King, but I had a dream, and I woke.
Those are often the best basis for stories to write.
Right. Well, I had a very vivid dream, a waking dream, with a set of characters for what could cause disclosure, storyline, and I wrote my first novel 22 years ago. Never released it, never did anything with it. And it was really what could cause disclosure, but it was one of the steps that actually led me to becoming a public researcher. And I want to revamp that, bring it up to date, but it's basically a disclosure thriller, what could cause disclosure, and a storyline. So I want to go back to that, because
very cool. Wow.
And you know, there's plus I'm working on another book about my police sightings database. That's been on hold for 6, 7 years because of Rendlesham. I want to go back to that. What I will give you is a bit of an exclusive if you want it.
Yes, please.
And I don't know if it will actually happen, but I believe it's going to happen. That there is going to be a major UFO conference involving very senior people from around the world in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe in October.
Wow. And where does this information come from?
Well, I can't tell you at this stage, but suffice to say that it was originally slated to happen in May of this year, and then it's got put back, I believe, until October. It's now grown in terms of it's now going to be a week long, and it will feature the very top people in the world, all coming together in a Middle Eastern country.
Wow. So who are the organizers of this?
I can't tell you. Mm-hmm. But suffice to say that
But the major names will be there, or the
major names will be there, and so I think again, this is if it comes off, this will be the most important conference in the world this year, and it's got politicians involved, allegedly. So we'll see. But
that's really a piece of news.
I'm hopefully going to be a part of that. So we'll see.
Thank you for.
Can't say too much, but I really hope it happens. But it will happen in a Middle Eastern state.
Well, if it happens, and you're part of it. I really hope that we can have another talk after that.
Oh, obviously, but at this stage, I probably shouldn't be saying what I'm saying. But
yeah,
I think, like I'm trying to say, is that things are coming. It's just a question of when and if resources can be put towards it. But yeah, I hope that event will happen in October. I'm not sure.
Wow, fantastic. Interesting. Thank you. So good luck with your with that fantastic thing that you're hopefully a part of there, and with your novel and with your continued investigations, Gary. And thank you for taking the time to be here.
It's always a pleasure, Anders. Thank you.
Hello, my friends. If you like this video, don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to hit that like button and share the video with your friends. Please support the channel if you can. I appreciate all the support. You can become a Patreon for as little as $1 a month, or you can make a one-off donation via PayPal if you wish. All the links are in the description box below. Thank you.